Hey, this is Jessie again, and this is my second YouTube video on this channel called 30 Days of Healing. So welcome and thanks for watching. I'm going to be talking a little bit about three things today that are affecting my life and that I am learning to sort of struggle through, and I think I have some insight that can perhaps help other people who are going through similar things. And those three things that I want to talk about today are rejection, patience, and confidence. A lot of what I'll be talking about is how struggles and difficulties and obstacles in our life, though hurt very much, very frequently, can be sources of immense strength. That's one of the lessons that I've really learned in my life, not to diminish the pain that these struggles cause, but to offer some sort of hope that a lot of times the most difficult things we go through end up yielding the best results in the long run for us in terms of development and growth. So I want to talk about rejection because it is something that I've really been struggling with recently. I mentioned it in my first video, but I'm going to really talk about how to handle rejection, how it feels, and see if I can connect with someone else. Maybe you have some great ideas on how you've dealt with rejection in the past. I'd love to hear from you. I'll start sort of by talking about this thing called the list. I'm a really big sort of believer in the law of attraction and vibes, and so I remember a couple years back reading this Oprah article, and it was called The List, and you are supposed to write down 100 things that you're looking for in a partner. And there was all these stories of these women who had written down this list, and they had like manifested this partner, and they would end up, remembering years down this list that they had written, and they would pull it out and see, oh my gosh, this is like to a T who I manifested. And the idea behind this list is to be really definitive about what you're looking for in a partner and someone, which I am all for. I think that's a great idea, to be really specific and to really dig down inside to see who it is that your inner guidance might feel could complement you. And so, I wrote this list and kind of tucked it away, and I never thought about it again until I got into a relationship, of course, and I just remember thinking, wow, this guy is so much about these things I wrote on this list, like these contradictory things that I just never thought would really manifest in one person, like a musician but really logical and good at math and business but still into art, and all these things that I had written on my list that I never thought I could find. And so throughout our whole relationship, I would tell him, babe, I wrote this list and you were it, and it's just so crazy. And to me, that was the universe telling me, this is your soulmate, and I had never believed in soulmates before this, but I, it made me feel so sure, I guess, in a way. And even after, when we broke up, I kind of made this last, I guess you could say, ditch to really express my feelings, because I do believe if you love someone, you have every right to try and fight for them. And so I couldn't find the list, but I rewrote it, and it was, I'm not going to lie, I think I was keeping more in mind of writing a list that was just writing 100 things about who he was. So I don't know if it was necessarily true to me, but we ended up, I still got rejected. And so I was going through my stuff today. I was living with him and also living with my parents and had an apartment. All my stuff is in 3 different places. So I was going through some of my stuff today to find this Social Security card, and I end up finding the list, the original list. And I just thought, what a bitch. Like, why couldn't I have found that, like, right when he broke up with me, and we could have had this, I remember reading in the Oprah article, it was like this couple had a fight and they were about to break up, and this woman was like, oh, but the list, I found the list. And so she runs and grabs it, shows it to the guy, and they like, oh, this is me. There's only like 4 things on this list that I'm not. Like, I can't believe it. Love you. They stay together happily ever after. And so, in my head, I have this perspective that, things are meant to be, and I ruined it because why is, like, the universe is laughing at me by finding this list, like, when it's too late, and I went back and read the list, and there were a lot of things on there that were still very similar to my ex. There were some things that weren't. I think maybe like 10 or 15 out of 100 items didn't really describe him. And so for a while this morning, I felt really bummed out and sad. Like, why am I getting rejected from this guy that clearly this is what I want? And if that is the perfect person for me and he's saying no, like, that's a bad feeling. And so I started to kind of try and move out from that suffering into a greater understanding of what rejection really means. Through this breakup, it's been a goal of mine to, instead of fall into a trap of self-pity and sadness, which I'm not going to lie, it's still there much of the time, but to at least use this as a catalyst to really examine a lot of the things that I want to work on within myself. And so I think I finally came to a realization about, rejection and these sort of limiting beliefs I held about relationships, and the quote-unquote perfect partner. So the thing with the list is, I think it's a great idea to be, I guess you would say, like, really specific with what you're looking for, and to not be afraid to reach down inside and ask yourself, what is it that I want? But I think you also have to ask yourself, like, where were you at the time in your life that you wrote this list? So even if he at the time, or even still now, is what I want, that doesn't mean I'm ready for him, or for someone like him, because again, there are 7 billion people in the world, and he didn't fit every item on the list, so who's to say there isn't someone that fits every item on the list? Or, looking at it from another perspective, because there are always tons of perspectives to look at things from. Certain things like hair color and eye color, like, do I really care about that? If I met someone that, okay, maybe wasn't 6'4" and didn't have brown hair, but is 6'2" and has blonde hair and treats me like, is great and is amazing, would I, reject him or say, oh, he can't be right because he didn't fit the list, And so I'm just saying that I think what we want over time can change. Even within a relationship, both partners end up changing anyways, and your needs and wants end up changing. So the only point I'm trying to make here about these limiting beliefs we have about relationships is that there is not one perfect person out there for you. And so if, a relationship does end, even if he was everything you wanted, it doesn't mean you can't find that again in someone else, or maybe down the road with that person again, if it could just not be the right time. And so, of course, rejection hurts, but a lot of times we're basing that hurt from the rejection and these really rigid beliefs we hold about ourselves, like, this is the only person that will love us, I think more of it really has to do not with him rejecting me, but with me rejecting me. I think I wanted love and a future with someone so badly that I didn't listen to my intuition all the time, and maybe things got really bad in the end because I didn't really listen to my intuition in the beginning about maybe this is moving too quickly, or I know I need space, but I'm afraid if I ask for it, I'll lose you. And so I made those mistakes, which just says to me I wasn't mature enough to be in that kind of relationship that I was really looking for, you know? And so it's not really about whether or not he was the right person for me, but if I was ready at the time for him. And now perhaps learning those things is moving me towards being ready for the right person, whether or not who's on a list or not. I'd like to just really read this quote I found that I posted on my Tumblr as well. It says, if a man discovers a diamond in the earth, but through ignorance or short-sightedness believes it to be a worthless stone and so casts it aside, does this tell us more about the diamond or the man? Whether someone rejects someone else can tell us so much more about the rejectors than the rejected. So it furthers that if someone does reject you, don't inevitably feel it's because you're unlovable or destined to be alone, because what they've done is give you very clear feedback about themselves. Kind of cool, huh? That helped me, I think, because it's true. It's not always about you. Sometimes it is about the other person. And that doesn't mean they're bad or wrong, or they just are seeing something from a certain perspective and you're seeing it from another perspective. It doesn't have to mean you need to change at all or you've done anything wrong. And so I think my point to wrap this first part up is that a lot of times rejection is tied into these really strict limiting beliefs we have about ourselves and about how the world works and about how relationships work. And from what I have come to intellectually understand in my 29 years of life experience is that everything is dynamic, everything is in a state of change. And so to believe that your perspective on one thing is infinitely true and will always be true and there is no possibility of change is probably hindering you from really being able to grow and see things from a lot of different ways. So that kind of brings me into patience. I've always been an impatient person, we'll say. And I think, a very common adage is time heals all wounds. And even I remember when my ex broke up with me, he was like, I just need some time to let the dust settle and then maybe we can see, what happens. And, there's all of these ideas about how the progress of time can change things. And I've really noticed that that's true, of course, but that you can't sit around being patient. Like, you kind of have to get on with your life a little bit and realize that those lessons about patience kind of come after you stopped thinking about being patient. In terms of relationships, I've noticed every guy I've ever dated that has broken my heart, after some period of time, when the hurt has dissipated, they've always come back and validated me somehow, validated that they hurt me, and that they made a mistake, maybe even wanting me back, or if not wanting me back, at least apologizing to me for the way they treated me. And that only comes when you've moved on. And I say that just to say, for anyone that is dealing with heartbreak right now, or I know a lot of times when I was in a relationship and then got my heart broken, I really blamed myself always. It was always my fault, especially if I was the one who got dumped, like there's something wrong with me. And it just goes to show so often it's not you. In a weird twist of fate, right around the same time my boyfriend and I broke up, I reconnected with an ex, and not in any type of romantic way, but, just very casually through Facebook. And he was sort of my first big heartbreak. And I thought I would never see him again. I would never talk to him again. And he really hurt me. He just ended up kind of breaking up with me and moving away with very short notice. And I really thought, what did I do wrong? Because there wasn't necessarily like this horrible ending. And I felt awful about it. And, even after we broke up, he came to get his stuff a month after, and we still acted like we were together and and everything was good and we were boyfriend and girlfriend, and and then he left and never talked to me again. And I was just like, whoa, like, God, what's wrong with me? And I really carried that with me. And I ended up very quickly after getting into the worst relationship of my life, right after that. Give yourself time to heal. Another lesson. Anyways, we ended up kind of talking a little bit on Facebook, and it's been 6 years now, so I've gotten over that, thank goodness. And I know he wasn't the right guy for me, but he was like, I'm sorry, I didn't treat you right. And I was like, well, I would have loved to hear that 6 years ago, but I think it was really poignant that it happened now when I'm in the midst of this really difficult breakup, because I think it's helping me remember that even though my ex right now doesn't have any plans of apologizing or really showing that maybe he made some mistakes too, it doesn't mean he won't in the future. It doesn't mean he won't miss me. And it also doesn't mean I'll never see or talk to him again. I mean, I literally thought I will never see this ex again, ever. I mean, he doesn't live in the same state as me. He was never like a Facebook person. I mean, I was really shocked, actually, that we reconnected. And it just goes to show that you never know when someone will show back up in your life, and you never know when you will get that validation. And that's where patience is like a really long-standing practice, that you just have to kind of trust that how you're feeling is valid. And even if your ex or someone who is rejecting you is not validating your opinions, you don't need to. You don't need them to. And chances are, if they've hurt you, at some point after you get over it, they're probably going to come back and say, like, I'm sorry, you were right. I did do some things that weren't great, or, maybe they'll work through some of their issues and see you in a new light. And it's not necessarily that you've changed. It's just that it was never about you to begin with. And so that kind of brings me into my last part that I want to talk about, which is confidence. And I want to share something I wrote in terms of a self-compassion exercise I did yesterday. Okay, so this was my day 19. That was yesterday. So today is my day 20 of 30 days of healing. And I would recommend this to anyone, because I think it's always good to work on yourself and practice. Again, going back to patience and practice. Practice makes, not perfect, but practice makes permanent. So whatever you continue to practice will become permanent over a period of time in your brain. If you continue to practice something over and over, it literally creates new wiring, of different neurons firing in your brain, and it makes them permanent. So not only do you want to practice, but you want to practice correctly, because then you start to really develop new parts of your brain and new ways of thinking. So the exercise is called Identifying What We Really Want. And Kristen Neff asks you to think about the ways you use self-criticism as a motivator, and think of a particular trait where you criticize yourself about. And because I'm really thinking about relationships, that's what's relevant right now in my life. My personal trait was that I'm really scared of rejection. And so I tend to be either too clingy or needy, or just believe too much that I'm not going to find someone to love forever. And so the recommendation for this exercise is to get in touch with that emotional pain, and describe how it makes you feel. And so, I said, well, this causes me to feel sad and scared and anxious and angry, pretty much all the bad emotions. That's what this feeling causes. And so she says, okay, well, next, see if you can think of a kinder way to motivate yourself to change. What language would like a nurturing friend use to point out how this behavior is unproductive, but also encourage you to do something different? So I wrote this, and I want to read it because I think I need to really continue to read this, to practice it, to make it permanent, because you can say and write something once and it can just get lost in the sea of your brain. So I said, well, everyone wants to be loved, but the real catch-22 of it is the part that makes it simultaneously easy and hard to find love is that true love cannot exist outside of yourself. So in a sense, it's easy because you can know that all your worries and fears about whether or not someone will love you will naturally go away on their own when you love yourself, because those aren't very loving behaviors, right? To be like clingy and really afraid of rejection, that's not loving. It's not a loving stance towards yourself. But it's hard because, there is this lower part of our brain that sort of creates these feelings from one single seed of a thought, and the feelings feel so real. And they are in a way, but not in the way that we think. I guess they're real in that, yes, you're feeling them, but they're not necessarily indicative of a true reality, except for the fact that you keep repeating them and believing them. That's how they become real, is through your own control. So next time you start to worry about a lack of love or getting rejected, feel like you can't change this needy, clingy behavior, try and find yourself in that moment before the thought transforms into a feeling, and remind yourself it's all good. That's a shout out to one of my mentors who says that. And all you have to do is love yourself, and the rest will happen naturally. And likely you're already a really lovable person. And so to sum that up, I don't know now going back and reading it if it makes as much sense, but that you will never be in a healthy, loving relationship until you love yourself fully, completely, 100%. And if you don't, the relationship will dissipate. And I definitely learned that with my most recent relationship. I had just started to feel really deserving of love, and so I thought I was ready, but I jumped way too quickly into it, and I lost myself. And that's okay, because I'm rebuilding and I'm relearning, and now reapproaching dating, I have to remember that it's not about trying to get someone to love me at all, because as soon as I decide to love myself and continue that on a day-to-day basis, I will naturally attract what's right for me and the right partner. So I hope that helps you. I wanted to just briefly, I know this is long, but I'll try and maybe edit it down, and if not, thanks for listening. But one of the cool things about this breakup, again, has been my process of trying to become a little bit more enlightened. And I had previously sort of dabbled in Nichiren Buddhism, and I've started to get back into it. And I went to a local meeting the other night. Living Buddhism is the magazine that you can go online. I know it's probably backwards, but it's on SGI. I think I'll link to it, the SGI site, and subscribe to the magazine. But I happened to just pick one up and open it, and it led me to a really great article called "Perseverance Leads to a Springtime of Victory." And I've always loved the metaphor of like winter turning to spring, and that's what this excerpt is about. So briefly, I'll read from this and end for today. But it says, Nichiren Buddhism is grounded in hope. It empowers us to transform even life's greatest difficulties into sources of good fortune and joy. A time of hardship in life may be compared to winter, and the fulfillment of joy that come from winning over it to spring. Moreover, the Winter Lake junctures can become turning points to propel us towards enlightenment and enduring happiness. Because Nichiren Daishonin, probably didn't say that right, I'll try harder next time, strove to spread a revolutionary teaching capable of reliving the suffering of all people in this misery-filled age of the latter day of the law. He was persecuted repeatedly, and his attempts were even made on his life. Despite this, he wrote, "Not once have I thought of retreat." And continues that winter always turns to spring. When the spring of victory comes after a winter of harsh trials, everything is transformed into happiness and joy. Without having cried, you cannot genuinely laugh. Without having suffered, you cannot savor real joy. I'm sure there are times when in the midst of some difficulty you think, why me? But that, in fact, is your chance to fulfill the mission you have chosen. The deeper your suffering, the greater your mission in overcoming it. So thank you for listening, and anyone out there struggling or suffering, if you have any questions or just want someone to talk to, please feel free to contact me, and I wish you light and love, and thank you for listening and giving me your time.